All right, guys, we are broadcasting to the world now. Here we go. This is episode number 369 of This Week in Photo. Welcome back to TWiP. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Joining me today on the show to discuss the world of photography, or at least the goings-on in the world of photography this week, are Mr. Yevgeny Chabatarov and Mr. Doug K. Hey, guys. How you doing?
Very good. How are you, Frederick?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Yeah,
So Yevgeny,
sure.
Yevgeny, let's start with you, man. I know every time you come on, there's some changes in the world that you work in, which is the 500 pics world, right? So what's going on now? What's new with you?
As usual, tons of new stuff. So I'm like, whenever I stop working, I'm still at the office, though I'm alone, but working on the new product called Discussions. So coming up pretty soon, maybe in a week or two. Gonna be our biggest launch of the year again, and this is the groups or discussions, whatever you call them. We'll start with discussions, so you'll be able to have critiques and you'll be able to have local groups. Something that people asked for a long time, so we're finally getting to release that.
That's cool. That's cool. Is there some documentation on your site or a blog post or something that people can go check out?
Nothing yet, so you can go on 500px.com and opt in to get the first look at that when it's ready. So expect that in the next couple of weeks.
Sweet. All right. Well, welcome to the show. It's always good to have you.
Same here. Thanks.
All right, and also my good buddy over there, Mr. Doug K. Hey, Doug, what's happening in your world?
Well, I've been busy, Frederick. You know, I was looking at my notes. I haven't been on This Week in Photo for about 6 months.
No, I feel like I talk to you every couple days.
Well, yeah, we do, but I haven't been on the show since January. So anyway, it's fun to be back.
Wow,
Yeah.
we'll have to fix that. We'll have to fix that.
I was looking at what have I done since then? Well, I think I've left out a continent or two from my list here, but I've been to Maui to shoot humpbacks. My second trip to Cuba. I was a student in a workshop, a great workshop with Jay Maisel in New York City that I just loved.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of teaching, and I am one, as you are, one of the initial masters in Trey Ratcliffe's Arcanum. Which has been fascinating to see that evolve. And we've been doing All About the Gear every 2 weeks for a little over a year now.
I know the time is flying, and the gear keeps flying at us. And I've been following you on Google Plus, and you are like putting the Sony A7S through its paces. And from the post that I see up there, you seem to be pretty excited about it.
Yeah,
is that the case?
That's right. We're getting ready to record that review. I'm getting my notes together, and that should be live, about a week after This Week in Photo comes out.
All right. Well, cool. Don't spill it. I'm looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are. So
I won't tell you a word.
Cool. So what's up with me? So in my world, I had a chance to head up to Petaluma yesterday, Petaluma, California, and hang with Leo Laporte from This Week in Tech. I was a guest on his show on TWiP, which is kind of weird. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like Leo, I look at him as like one of the main characters that formed this whole industry of podcasting, and to be sitting kind of co-hosting with him is kind of, it's very, I felt very honored to be up there. But
he deserved it.
I don't know. Leo's cool. He's always gracious, and he's always, he's Leo. Leo's the same off air as he is on air. So it was a good time. We talked about some cool stuff, technology related. So I won't go into it now. Although we did talk about one photography related thing. He brought up this what was it? So Google Glass. There's this company that developed this accessory for Google Glass that connects to your forehead, so you can take pictures by just thinking. So I was like, and it's like this thing that comes around from the glass and attaches right here so that you could just think. And I'm like, yeah. Well, you'll have to watch the episode of TWiP to find out what I said. It was pretty interesting.
We're ready for the Google implant.
Oh my God. Yeah. Where is it all going? All right, guys, we got lots of news to talk about this week. Before we do that, I want to thank our first sponsor for this episode of TWiP, and that's our friends over at Squarespace.com. All right, gents, the first story is about a Kickstarter project. It's from a company called EO1, and basically they're running a Kickstarter to reinvent the digital picture frame. You guys have seen these things in Target all over the place, whereas usually it's no bigger than 8x10, and they put the cheapest display they can put in it. Maybe if you're lucky, they'll put some CF slot on it, or maybe some onboard storage and some crappy transitions, right? And that's what you get. Some of the better ones that I've seen over the years do stuff. They might be Wi-Fi enabled, so you can plug them into some online photo share or something. Well, this company they kicked off a Kickstarter. This thing has a 23-inch 1080 HD display, a smart display. It's got an awesome. They'll come in a variety of frames, and these are actually cool-looking kind of designer frames. 1920 by 1080. It's running Android on a 1 gigahertz processor with 3 dedicated graphics accelerators. It's got 1 gig of RAM, 2 gigs of flash storage, and it uses Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And if you back the campaign, it's a Kickstarter, so if you back it, you'll get one for $300, but it's going to retail for around $500. Now, I want to throw this at you guys because, first of all, I want to know, Doug. Let's start with you. Have you ever purchased a digital picture frame or been given one? And if so, have you used it?
Yeah, I got one when they first came out. I'm guessing this is, what do you think, maybe 4 or 5 years ago? Would you think that's about right?
Or more, yeah.
And I got one and loaded it up with a bunch of JPEGs, and I gave one to my mother, in fact, some stuff, and subsequently completely stopped using it. I haven't checked with Mom to see what she's up to, but yeah, it's something I tried and I got past.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of issues that I had when I had one. It was, first of all, the display didn't do the photos justice that you want to display on there, so they look crappy, and then it was too small, and then the transitions, at least the one I had, the transitions didn't look great, and it was too dim. Plus, you had to give it power, it was...
Yeah, the iPad came out, and I think the iPad killed the picture frame.
Yeah, yeah.
Because everything, even the first iPad, everything looks so good on that. Right. And so why have the picture frame? What are you going to put it up on your wall? And as you said, then you had to have a power cord running out of the thing. Yeah. It wasn't quite right.
I want one. I mean, like these, Evgeny, when you see this, especially coming from a 500 pic standpoint, and all the crazy, amazing images that show up on 500 pics. By the way, Evgeny, I was talking to Leo yesterday, and he was talking about, he just got back from Hawaii. And he's like, where should I post these photos so that I could share, Of course I said 500 pics. You know what his response was? His response was the same that I told you, I think, around the first time you came on TWiP was, all the photos up there are awesome, and I don't want to... They're too good. I don't want to put my images up there. So anyway, about the picture frame, what do you think? I mean, is this something that might release the photos from their online cage and put them in your living room?
It's funny. First of all the current picture frames, they just garbage, right? They're all horrible. That's why they never caught on. Yeah. But for this one, I saw it actually a couple of days ago, and my first thought was, why we haven't heard from those guys? Why they haven't reached out to us about the getting our photos on their platform? Because there's National Geographic, there's a lot of there's like a few other archives that they're tapping into. Yeah. And we haven't heard from those.
I'm sure you will after this show. Trust me.
My Twitter is right here.
There you go.
And with all that, I looked it up on Kickstarter. I think it's really interesting. I think the company, the name is pretty cool, Electric Objects, and the overall kind of like idea of high-tech frame that blends seamlessly with in a house, I think might be really interesting for like higher-end homes. It wouldn't look good in like old school, old type houses, but in some modern apartment might look really, really cool.
Yeah, and you could, I bet, the first folks that will start adopting these are these, high-end hotel chains, like the W or some of the boutique hotels where you walk in, you're like, whoa, there's pictures on the wall, and they move, So yeah,
maybe.
Yeah,
they still all stuck with the docks for the old iPhone chargers, the ones that you get there.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, but you know what? I was looking at this price wise, and how big is this thing? 23 inch, right? So
Yeah.
you go to some framing shop or Michaels or something. Is this, a retailer here in the U.S. called Michaels where you can go get prints framed, and depending on what you bring in there, like for example, I brought in a couple of my old military certificates to have framed and matted, an archival safe and all that. I mean, for a couple, you're looking way over $500,
Yeah. Yeah.
for just some frames and some mats. And now they're talking about, HD display hanging on your wall with a custom frame or at least a boutique frame, a gig of RAM in this thing, and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Not that I'm going to put my, separation paperwork on the wall in this thing, but like you said, wouldn't it be great to plug in my 500px feed and
Yeah.
put this on the wall, or even put 3 or 4 of them next to each other on the wall, make a little display.
Maybe do panorama.
Yeah,
If it supports panoramas.
yeah,
But from the comments that I've heard is that people can do the same stuff for half the price if they don't mind the wires and stuff. You can have a cheap display. You can have, I don't know, cheap Chromecast computer or something like that, and just run it for $150 or so.
Wow.
So it's still on the higher end. But I agree, when I went to the framing shop and they charged me $200 for a frame, I'm like, thanks. That would be my first and last frame that I do there.
Exactly what I said.
Yeah, it's a little bit overkill for real framing. So I think it might catch on with people who are actually going to framing shops like you.
Yeah, totally. No, Doug, I think it was the last TWiP or one of the more recent TWiPs. We talked about the idea of this smart glass. And that's the glass that you can apply an electric current to, and it will either go opaque or be clear, that kind of thing. And then my brain starts thinking about Google Glass and these sort of heads-up technologies that are out there that allow us to interact with things in ways that we wouldn't have ordinarily been able to interact with them. So when I look at something like this, I'm thinking, like science fiction movies. I want to wake up and have the windows in my bedroom be opaque until I say some command, and then they just get clear. I want the picture frames on my walls built into the wall, not frames, built into the wall, showing art that's reflective of whatever my mood is. I want to look in the mirror in the bathroom and have data showing up on, like, hello, Frederick, here's the weather for today. And by the way, your first appointment is to record all about the gear with the K11.
You want one of those Minority Report screens.
Thank you. I want to live in the Minority Report.
Well, I'm going to take I have a different opinion. I'm pretty underwhelmed by this. I think this is a very 20th century concept. Not a 21st century concept. It's essentially a medium-sized picture frame that's expensive. I bet everyone has seen it, and maybe the quality is very good. But 23 inches is an odd size. It's
that's the small iMac essentially, right?
Yeah.
That's the size of the entry-level iMac screen.
Well, you talked about the hotels, for example. People are used to going in and seeing flat screens that are 32, 50 inches, that kind of stuff. And I don't think a 23-inch screen is going to excite people. I don't think for $500 you're not going to. I'm sorry, I don't believe that you're going to put 4 of them on your wall at $500 a piece.
Right.
You got better things to do with $2,000. And I just think it's expensive for what it is. I think that something smaller might work, especially if it gets down below $100. Other than that, I think you've got to go larger and keep this same price point. I think 23 inches is this desktop computer size, and I think the world is going away from this size. They're going smaller and larger. 23 inches is a weird size these days for any display.
Evgeny, Doug K says size matters. What do you think?
Well, actually,
the first time I said that.
It's a really good point, and I agree. If we're talking homes, I have a couple of pictures at my place, and they are 30 by 30. One picture is 48 by 72 inches. So the bigger the picture, the more impact it makes. And now I imagine 23-inch screen attached to the wall, and it's gonna be really small.
Right.
So like I would probably ignore it for the most days. So I feel like yeah, it might be actually a good point for them to go bigger. 36 inches maybe, 42 or something like that, something that is actually substantial. But again, like it probably will be heavier, pricier, and harder to mount, and like all the other problems that comes with that.
But I don't know. I mean, you think so? 42 inches. This television behind me. It's a Sony television. It's a late model. I think it's like last year's model, maybe a little bit older. And it's 42, and those are cheap. I think that television you get for under $400 for that, and it's HD. I mean, it's a smart
Yeah,
TV,
and you can use that, and
YouTube,
you can use
everything on it.
Chromecast, right? So you
Yeah.
can use any apps. You can I don't know, stream whatever photo stream you want. It's connected probably to the internet, or
It
like
is.
there's so many. There's Android dongles. There is the Chromecast. There's Apple TV. Like there's so many of other things that can connect to the internet.
Mhm.
And instead of, I guess, inventing the new stuff, you can use your TV instead.
Yeah.
So
So I don't know.
I just went to the Costco website. I said, go to Costco and see what it costs for a TV. Here's a 46-inch TV for $400.
Hmm.
So, you put the flat screen TV on the wall and you hook it up to a, like say a Chromecast or an Apple TV or something like that, and you've got essentially the same thing, I think.
Yeah. Or
So,
you're really daring and you take that TV to Michael's and have him put a frame on it for $1,000.
well, but you talk about the future and you talk about things like, your windows suddenly becoming pictures and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's a lot more exciting. And, anyway, you go on.
That
But
is.
I just think this
So
might be an idea.
keep that thought going, Doug. So what's the ideal if you were, you had a new house built, you're Tony Stark. You had a new house built and you want to put some digital art on the wall and you want to display your favorite 500 pics images from all your friends on your walls. What does that device look like? If you can't have it built in, let's say you have to buy something physical, what size and what capabilities does that device have?
Well, of course, I want the entire wall with seamless LED that emits no heat whatsoever and uses no electricity.
Okay.
And of course, I'd want one, as you say, on the window side of the living room as well that could, with a wave of the hands could become transparent or translucent.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen that. I don't know much about it, but, we've seen these windows. I don't know if they have liquid crystal in them or what they are, but where you can make them translucent or even opaque. But yeah, I think the idea of a big screen that's integrated into a wall, which is what anybody in the graphics business tries to do for these big conferences, conventions, hotel things. I'd love to have one of those in my living room.
Yeah, I mean every time I go, my one of my favorite hotels, if not my favorite hotel in Vegas, is the oh God, now I forgot about it. It was the hotel next to Mandalay Bay, but now the Cosmopolitan. So in the lobby of the Cosmopolitan, I mean it's like LCD screen Nirvana on pillars, and they're all integrated and all that. And every time I go in there, I'm thinking, I want this in my house. I need this in my house. Evgeny, what's the ideal display for you? Is it just a television that you just pipe in a feed into, or is it something more integrated into your home?
Look, if you think holistically, my display is the phone, and like most people spend their days like this, just like watching, reading, looking at everything just on their phone, right? So it's 4-inch.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to say that, but overall, we've seen the Bill Gates, I think, presented one of the visions like you wanted maybe like 20 years ago with the seamless walls and screens. It's still the dream for most people, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see something happening in the next 10 years, but again, screens got larger, right? Like we're using larger screens than we used 10 years ago. So some things are happening. But
Yeah.
look, the larger the better. I mean, like people go to IMAX for a reason, right? It's for the sound and for the big screen. So if you can have an IMAX experience at your home for whatever you're doing, playing games or watching movies, yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much cool stuff out there. I mean, I mentioned on a recent TWiP that I was recently given an Xbox One, and got it all hooked up, wired through Comcast and all that, and the voice, I mean, I'm not that much of a gamer, though I was playing Wolfenstein earlier, I admit it, but I'm not that much of a gamer yet. But the entertainment features in this thing are insane. I think it's severely mismarketed by Microsoft because it's an entertainment hub that's voice activated. Like literally, I'm sitting on my couch and I'll say, Xbox, go to Netflix. Boom, I'm watching Netflix. I don't have to shout it. I don't have to do anything, stand on one foot. Or I can say, Xbox, play Wolfenstein. Boom, I'm playing the game. Just like that. That kind of ease of use and friction-free UI, I'm starting to want in my entire house. Like when I wake up, I want to be able to say, whatever command, turn on CNN or something without fumbling for a remote and doing all this crazy stuff. It should be voice activated. As I move through my house, I want to say, go into night mode and have all the lights dim, the windows go opaque, and the fireplace comes on. Something. Or romantic mode. Pour some wine. I don't know. I mean, right? I mean, we're getting a little bit off topic, but isn't that the way it should be, Doug? Shouldn't it be like that? Is that science fiction?
I would just like to get a multi-room DVR that works.
Yeah.
I've been through two.
Good luck. Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. I think we'll get there. I think, Apple and Google are certainly going into the home automation market. We're going to see a lot of that moving forward. And it's going to be an exciting time. We talk about, just to take it back to photography, you and I the other day were talking about how amazing it is. I mean, just in the 1 year that we've been doing All About the Gear, think of how much things have improved in mirrorless cameras in just 1 year.
Yeah.
And this is, just part of technology. Home automation is going to be on the same kind of curve.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. And, Apple announced at the last Worldwide Developers Conference that they're enabling that sort of thing, and they're working with all Honeywell and lots of home automation experts to integrate that kind of control into the next generation iPhones and iOS devices. But that's cool. But I don't want the device involved. I just want to talk to my house and have it work. I don't know. All right, guys, let's move on. So this next story is about photography, bringing it full circle. So a couple of, last year we did a story about plagiarism, specifically regarding photographer Doug Gordon and Jasmine Starr. They were accused of plagiarism, in some cases taking, I think at the very least it was taking ideas. At the very most, there were some images and text that was copied verbatim from one site to another, and there were lots of mea culpas and apologies and tears and all that stuff, and we thought that was behind us. Unfortunately, it's not behind us. So basically, Doug Gordon got caught again. The popular website Photo Stealers, I'm going to read this out. So Doug Gordon is in hot water again. The popular website Photo Stealers called him out once again for plagiarized content on his website, specifically in his bio section. Those gave him the benefit of the doubt the first time around are not necessarily going to give him a second chance. One of his sponsors, Nikon, he's a Nikon icon of imaging. They have removed him from the Nikon ambassadors list, and folks like Gary Fong have come out to say that they're disappointed and disassociating themselves with him, all that kind of stuff. So for this panel, the plagiarism stuff, we all know about that. If you want to read the gist and get into the fire and pitchforks that the internet has out for Doug, you can go look at the comments on the site. We'll link to it from the blog post for this episode. But for This Week in Photo, I wanted to talk specifically about plagiarism and how to interpret that. So let me put a finer point on it. So if an artist, a visual artist, say a photographer like us, takes, you're going to do a composite. So you take several images and you make an art piece, right? So you take the eyes off of this and you put the nose off of this and you take a background from over here, and it's not necessarily your work. You're remixing other artists' work, which has been done for centuries, right? You're remixing it into a collage. That new piece of art is now ostensibly your work now because it comes from pieces of the other work. Ideally, you would cite the sources, but in today's world, it's not necessarily necessary. So on the visual side, that's what happens. On the oral side, with audio, there's been remixing and sampling and mashups and all that stuff that have been going on for years, and it seems to be okay. We had a little blurb, I don't know, like 5 years ago about, sampling and how much can artists sample and all that stuff. But by and large, a lot of songs you hear today have a little bit of other songs in them, and we're okay with that. But it seems like when it gets down to text, that's when people's feathers get raised. So if you remix text and take pieces of a paragraph and remix them to make your own, like in the case of Doug Gordon, then that becomes plagiarism and copyright infringement and all that. Now, yeah, I couch this under the umbrella of, yes, if you're going to look at someone's work and be inspired by it or use a piece of it legally in your work, yes, you should cite the source always. But Doug, I'll put this on you first. Where's the line? And was Doug Gordon, if I'm sure you read this and you saw where the copying pieces, what he copied, was he wrong in doing what he did, or was he just doing like high school students do all the time and saying, okay, I'm gonna take this and change this, speaking from not personal experience, but I'm gonna change this and make it my own? What do you think?
Well, I think the latter is true in that he seems to have just picked sentences, entire sentences, or changed a few words here and there, but it's pretty clear that it's a copy of the original.
Yeah.
What's sad here is that it's really disappointing in the world of professional. Let's not worry about the students for the time being, but the fact that somebody would feel that they can't write their own bio, that they have to take copy from somebody else, possibly a client, to do this, it just shows something about him, and I don't think we necessarily need to pursue it because the guy, there's a problem there.
Right.
He obviously thought at some point it was okay to take pictures. I mean, that's a fairly criminal activity, to simply take a picture and claim it as your own. I think people should go to jail for things like that. Yeah. This is a little more pathetic, I think. To think you have to literally use somebody else's copy in your bio. So yeah, I feel sorry for the whole situation.
Yeah, and it gets really. I mean, I agree with you. It's disappointing and sad on a bunch of different levels. But I also look at it from the standpoint of this guy was a leader. I mean, he's a speaker at WPPI. This isn't just some random photographer that hey, I'm out shooting a wedding every month and blah blah blah. This is somebody who's purported to be a leader in the industry and running workshops and telling people how to become a good photographer, spreading the good word of photography per se. And now you caught with your pants down.
Let's be really clear. This is not a mashup. This is not the question of is it okay to recombine pieces from other artists for the sake of creating new art. This is somebody who simply doesn't have the confidence or the creativity to write his own copy.
Right.
And that's, like I say, that's sort of sad.
Yeah, that is sad. Evgeny, you saw this. When you saw this, first of all, what did you think? And then secondly, the whole idea of the mashup versus plain plagiarism / theft. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah. Well, actually, I looked up your bio and I liked it so much, so I copied it to my site. Sorry.
I hereby give you permission to use my bio,
Just change the name and location and stuff like that. Everything else matches, sort of.
Change the photo too, please. Change the photo.
Sort of matches, yeah. But you have a really good talking point in the doc, and it says, should we care about Doug? And I think the answer is just no. And it's pathetic, and look, there's 26 letters in English language. You can reuse them and remix them any way you like. But copying the whole paragraphs of someone else's life, that seems like a little too much. Though I've seen it happening many times, where people would just copy. I don't know whether it's I don't know what those people think, but I've seen people copying, for example, my my profile picture and my biography and pose as me, but with a different name. And like, why would you do that? So there's some questions that are still left unanswered, and I still have no idea why people would do anything like that, like pose as someone else, living someone else's life, especially on the internet. Like this guy is a little bit different, but it's just like incredible what people do.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you're first of all, yes, you're right. We should not care about Doug Gordon. We should just, let him fade to black, per se. But if that's going to happen, but I look at this, and what you were just talking about, Evgeny, makes me think about people that are new coming into photography. Say I want to be a wedding photographer, and it's that whole catch-22, like when you're trying to go get your first job. You can't get your first job until you have experience, and you can't get experience until you get your first job, right? So until you break that loop, you're kind of SOL.
So you go and steal someone else for us.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right. So what should those people do that are like, you know what? I'm gonna, and we've seen this. We've talked about this on TWiP before. People just taking other folks' portfolio and saying it's theirs so that they can get the job. First of all, what do we do about those folks? And then in the case of Doug Gordon and folks that come after him, and there will be folks that come after him that get caught, what should the punishment be? Should it just be, we let the internet ostracize you, or should there be something more punitive?
It's a good question. I think public shaming on the internet is pretty powerful in itself, and there's a lot of trolls and a lot of pitchforks coming out for everything that happens online.
Yeah, and some things that don't happen.
Yeah, and some things that don't happen. But in case of like wedding photographers stealing portfolios, the victims would be the clients who bought into the job, or had an assignment for the wedding day, and in the end they get horrible pictures that are not representative of the reality, right? Because those are not real clients. And if that would be my wedding day and I got horrible pictures instead of the ones that I expected,
yeah.
It's kind of like, first of all, my fault for not filtering that enough, but I would probably sue you, for things like that, for misrepresentation and whatever. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'll probably have to find out what I'll sue for. But there's there's probably some kind of like bad business that will come out of that.
Yeah, Doug, flip the bit. Take what Evgeny just said about, you're the client and you get screwed by one of these people that are purporting to be something that they're not. If you are a consumer, before you pull the trigger and sign the contract with a photographer, is there a way to safeguard? I mean, is there a way to have someone prove, if you're sitting in Starbucks getting ready to sign a wedding photographer and they bring their book to show you, these are some examples of some shots I've done, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. It looks a little bit like, David J. or Sarah Francis' work, but it's kind of good. So okay, I'll sign. Here's my check, my deposit. How does the consumer protect themselves against that?
In this particular case, I think it's fairly simple. First of all, you're going to get references.
Yeah. And
you're going to get references from other clients, and it's not good enough just to have the photographer show you the book that he produced for a wedding. You actually have to talk to the bride, perhaps, of that, and say, how was this photographer? Was he or she, what was it like to work with them? That's really important. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, anybody who's doing a wedding probably has a wedding planner. And I would definitely want to make sure that there's a relationship with the wedding planner and the photographer, that they both had faith in one another, because that's going to be a critical relationship in pulling off a wedding shoot. Yeah. So this is one case where I think it's not too hard to check the bona fides and know what you're getting. Unfortunately, there are people who don't go to that much trouble, but they should.
Yeah, wedding planners. I think I know maybe one person over the years I've been on the planet that has hired a wedding planner. Most people, most of the people that I know, at least from my circle, would do it themselves. They go into Bridezilla mode, and
Yeah, well, fine,
take
but
over.
check with at least a couple of other clients,
Yeah.
because just looking at the book and the photographs is not sufficient um, to really know what it's like to work with the person under pressure.
Yeah, yeah, because it's scary. Because it's the web, right? I mean, you could go on the web and build a portfolio in a couple of hours one night, and post them up and say, "Hey, this is mine. Here's my PayPal link. I'm taking deposits," and you're in business until you get caught. And then when you get caught, you'll never work in this town or on this planet again, right,
Yeah,
Evgeny?
Frederick. Don't get me started on the potato salad.
Oh yeah,
There's the other side of the internet as well, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Well, tell us what that is for the folks that may not know.
$15,000.
I don't know what's the current status, but the guy posted a Kickstarter campaign for making of potato salad and started making, I guess, raking a lot of cash because people like fun things and give money to random, to random things like this. So it shows the whole kind of like internet thing and how it rolls, and we're looking at the other Kickstarter campaign. It's all a matter of, I guess, like luck and how fun you make it to the other internet people.
Yeah.
So it's all weird and random, I guess.
Weird and random. Maybe that'll be the title of this episode. It's all weird and random.
A
Cool.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. Let's move on from this. So, Doug Gordon, if you're watching this, shame on you. And you should apologize to people. Anyway, let's move on to story number 3. The story number 3 is about Sony. So here's the blurb. Sony last week, the first image taken with their new revolutionary curved sensor was released in an article, well, the first image was, published by Nikkei. The new curved sensor was created to mimic eyes, which led to several advantages. For example, the sensor's shape allows for cheaper, smaller lenses with wider apertures while simultaneously getting rid of vignetting and aberrations. It also reduces the dark current, quotes, thereby reducing noise. All right, so the rumors say that we're going to see this curved sensor on the upcoming Sony full-frame RX2, and that's, Doug, you reviewed the RX1, right? I believe on All About the Gear. That's it's awesome. It's an amazing full-frame camera with a fixed lens on it that makes some pretty amazing pictures, and it looks like if the rumors hold, Sony's going to update it with this new curved sensor for the next revision of that. So, Evgeny, I'm going to throw this to you first. So, we've seen curved sensor, it's curved like the 2014, 2015 thing, because we've seen curved televisions from Panasonic, whoever. We've seen curved sensors now, curved smartphones. So what's with the curves? I mean, are curves necessary, like technologically, for a better experience or image quality, or is this just something new that these manufacturers can put in their bullet list to make you feel like you need to buy this thing?
No, I think it's a whole new process. So look, it just got a thought in my head. If you look at the human body, it's all curves. There's not a single straight line.
Yes. Hey, speak for yourself.
Unless you're in the military, I don't know.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's the eye is curved. So a lot of optics and physics were mimicking how the eye works to get the aperture and things like that. Just kind of like using the physics of the world to make that. So I think if we can make, or if Sony can make curved sensors to make for better cameras, so be it, right? Like, I would love a camera like that. I've heard that it's not going to be ready that soon for RX2 or anything like that, but we'll see. It's all the rumor mill right now. If the lenses are smaller, I'm all for it. I hate carrying all the heavy lenses. So,
well, there's
and
an
if
easy
the
fix
cameras
for
are
that.
smaller,
There's an easy fix. Just go with micro four thirds, and everything's smaller. You're done.
I'm looking at the D810, so I might go to the big.
You're shooting with the big guns there.
Yeah.
Doug, what about you? Is curved the way of the future? Are we going to start seeing curved displays and curved laptops and
Well, no. I think that
In a word, no.
I think this sensor sounds very cool. I can't imagine how they make this thing. I mean, that's a remarkable feat, right? Just the fact that you can make a sensor that way, given that it's mostly coming out of silicon.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does solve some very significant technical problems that both sensor manufacturers and lens manufacturers have been struggling to overcome since the beginning of photography. Because, you know, sheet film, roll film, digital sensors all have been flat. And of course, it's not the natural thing for these lenses, because the lenses want to have a consistent distance and a consistent angle from the focal point of the lens, which is, you know, between the lens and the sensor. So it's a technologically a significant breakthrough. It is going to require that lenses be redesigned to take advantage of it, or actually not even take advantage of it. Of course, lenses today are designed for flat sensors. So if it comes out as something like the RX2, that makes sense, because it's going to require a special kind of lens for it. Yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, it's cool, you know. And why is it that we're only seeing these kinds of innovations come out of Sony? Right. What was it last year? The first. I mean, the A7R that or A7S that you're testing right now, right? It's the first of its kind. The A7 and the A7R before it were the first of their kinds. They're experimenting on a bunch of different fronts in photography. Why aren't Nikon and Canon and other guys throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks? Evgeny, what do you think? Or Doug, whoever, take it.
Go ahead, Evgeny.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. Like, if you look at the Sony's market share, it's pretty small. So if you want to grow it, you have to figure something out. And Sony was never really strong in bigger cameras, as in, you know, Canon and Nikon would be really strong in wildlife and sports, just like dominating the sports. And there was like that joke that, you know, people were in FIFA were having the Sony shirts on and still shooting Nikon and Canon just because that's the default for sports.
Right.
So if that's not the case, then you go the other way, like smaller cameras, I guess more interesting sensors, and like more sensitivity, more frames per second, better autofocus. Just kind of like trying to figure out what's important to consumers or prosumers, and just, you know, see if it works. And I think with A7R, they hit their sweet spot. Like, you know, small cameras with amazing sensors. I think it's just, you know, the right approach to gain some market share.
Yeah, that's crazy. You know, just watching what they're doing is interesting. You know, like Doug, you purchased the Sony, the A6000, right? You own that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And what, you're in love with it, right?
It's a great camera. I have 3 Sonys now. I have the 6000, I have the A7, and the A7S. I own all 3.
Wow.
I bit the bullet, and my D800E is gone.
Did you sell it? You got rid of it?
I have sold it. It is gone.
You had that thing for less than a year, and you divorced it.
Is that right? Wow. Feels like 2 years, but whatever it is.
Such a good camera.
Evgeny's like, what is wrong with you?
I wasn't using it. I wasn't using it. I'm going on.
What's the price of the RX1? Is it like in 3,000 range?
Yeah, it is up there. Yeah, I think it's above 2,000. Yeah, it's 20.
So the RX2 might be even higher, right? So it might be like really premium.
The RX1, the Mark II that we reviewed, I think it's an overpriced camera. There's no doubt about it. But the image quality is extraordinary. So, you know, it's like the Rolex watches or the fancy loudspeakers. You're paying a real premium for it. Is it worth the money? Technically, no. But I know people who shoot medium format, and the only small sensor camera, meaning 35 millimeter equivalent, that they use is an RX1.
You know what? I think what Sony makes with this camera is their like flagship newest technologies. So we might see curved sensor there, but unlikely we'll see it in other cameras for the next few years. So it's just kind of like an experimental, and the latest technology that Sony has might just go into RX2. Overpriced technological marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's remember one thing, that Sony may be small in the camera market, but they pretty much own the sensor market. They are making sensors for
Nikon, yeah.
Nikon. There are rumors that they're making sensors for both Olympus and Panasonic. Fuji, of course, makes their own sensors that are very good and use a different technology. Canon is the one old school manufacturer that still makes sensors and makes some very good ones.
Yeah.
The 70D has a real breakthrough sensor in terms of autofocus. But Sony is, on All About the Gear, we do more shows on Sony gear than anything else, and it's not because I own it or like it. It's because that's where all the new stuff is coming from.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. I agree with Evgeny. This is more of a proof of concept at this stage, because no other manufacturer is going to adopt this simply because their lens line wouldn't be compatible with it. But it's we'll all see. We'll see where it goes. I have a lot of curiosity, let's say, about it.
Yeah. Well, it's good. This is definitely an industry that's not stagnating in terms of, in aggregate, let's say. In some areas it's stagnating with some manufacturers, but in aggregate overall it seems to be moving forward at a fast clip. With 4K, all this stuff is just mind-blowing. So, yeah, good stuff. So, Doug, speaking of All About the Gear, what's for the folks that may not have seen that show, tell us about that show a little bit. What is it?
Yeah, All About the Gear is a show that you and I do. Every 2 weeks we review some new photography gadget. 90% of the time it's a camera. And we just published the review of the Panasonic Lumix GH4, a marvelous camera that also shoots 4K video. We had a guest for the first time. Dave Dugdale was on, the video guru of all such things, and it was a great show. And in a week, as I mentioned, we're going to publish the Sony A7S review. But we've done 25 or so shows over the last year, and at the moment, it's only available on video. If you go to the thisweekinphoto.com page, you can see all the shows from there. And at this point, like I say, it's a video show because it's visual.
Yeah, and very shortly, I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. We're going to be flipping the switch on All About the Gear to make it a full podcast, so that just like This Week in Photo, you'll be able to subscribe to the All About the Gear show in a completely separate feed from This Week in Photo. So,
because right now, if you're viewing this show, you're probably actually listening to this show. I think we have far more listeners than we have viewers of the video, and that's the direction we're going.
Yep. And the audience will tell us if they like it, just like they told us they didn't like Doug Gordon and his plagiarism.
Hopefully we're a bit more original than that.
We are much more original. We can't help but be original. All right, guys. All right, it's time for some Q&A. This is where we answer listener questions that have been on our listeners' minds. This week's question comes to us from Joshua Lynn via our Google Plus community page, which, by the way, now has over 8,000 members. So if you'd like to join us over there, just head over there and join us, and you can submit your questions too. So this was an interesting question. I was hoping you guys could help me with this, because I couldn't quite grok what Joshua was talking about. So he says, dynamic range camera options, when should they be used, and what is the impact to ISO settings and noise? Does this only affect JPEG? What do other systems call this setting, such as Nikon's D-lighting? He says the Fuji Xe2 has a setting for dynamic range that affects contrast and shadows. A high DR setting in a contrasty situation opens up shadows. The trade-off is when setting 400. Do one of you guys write that in there? It sounds like that's answering the question. The trade-off is when setting 400 ISO DR to the minimum ISO is 800 for the image. So first of all, dynamic range as an image control. But me personally, maybe I'm old school, but for me it's been ISO, shutter speed, aperture, and exposure compensation. So I don't know if I've ever played with anything like a dynamic range control on a camera. Evgeny, on your Nikons, have you played with this stuff, like the D-lighting and all that?
You know what? So the new camera, the 810, it has an interesting setting that I was really keen to find out, and I really want to use it when I get a camera. It controls the tones, so it automatically measures the scene and makes make sure that your highlights are not overblown. So they're never too white. They're just like they're perfectly exposed. Everything else might be a little darker, but at least you don't lose any data in your shot. So that is really cool, especially if you're shooting something fast-moving where you don't have time to check your shot. You know, whether it's wildlife or weddings, they have a lot in common. And if you have something like that, I think it's really useful feature. For Canon, I know that they have the similar setting, but it bumps the ISO to 200. I'm actually not sure if it affects just the JPEG or RAW, though in the end I ended up never using that. So would love to have that programmatically, just so that my highlights would never be overblown. I think it's really cool. But overall, you know, I don't know how other cameras implement that.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're talking about is like on a car, an RPM limiter, so you don't blow the image or blow the engine. It will limit it so that you can your RPMs can only go to a certain level. So you're talking about clipping, kind of the same metaphor but applied to your highlights. So you can't.
Or automatic wipers.
Or. Or
like something you don't think about, right? But might help save you, or just like make it more convenient to you. So
yeah, I love it. Doug, you have anything to add to this for Joshua's question?
Well, I have to admit I'm not an expert on DRO. Sony calls it dynamic range optimization, and there's different names for it. But let me explain the part that I'm not clear on. This very important question of whether it's JPEG only or RAW. I think it's only on JPEGs. However, if whatever dynamic range optimization you're using, if it changes the ISO, then it's obviously going to, if you shoot RAW plus JPEG at the same time, it's obviously going to affect it for both. But my understanding is that these dynamic range optimizers basically break the image up into smaller areas and analyze the contrast between the foreground and background subjects to do the kinds of thing that Evgeny's talking about, which is hopefully protect the highlights. Now, what's tricky about this is that it sounds like it's doing the same thing as matrix metering does. Matrix metering is supposed to be able to figure out, you know, whether you have highlights or not, whether you're doing a silhouette or not. So I think that this is actually a step in the world of JPEG that's going beyond that, and that is, in particular, it is changing the mapping of the raw dynamic range, raw file dynamic range, into that of the JPEG, and shifting the highlights and shadows around at the point it makes a JPEG. Now, having said something like that I'm not sure of, boy, have I opened myself up for the comments.
Yes, you have. So I was just thinking that.
I just want to say today that thank you for your comment. I appreciate the fact that you know more about this than I do. Please keep the comments coming.
You know, I think it might be a little easier answer to that. A lot of people in Japan, where all the cameras are made, don't have computers. So they would print directly off the camera. That's why we have those weird Photoshop actions inside, like Nikons, where you can change everything. Because they would do it in the camera, and they would just.
I wondered who was using that stuff.
Exactly. Like nobody's here using this stuff. So because you know your workflow is always to put it on a computer, edit that a little bit, and maybe print it out. If you're in Japan, you're gonna print it out right off the camera, and that's what all these Photoshop options and I guess the dynamic range optimizer, or like whatever dynamic light optimizer, is from the same areas. Just kind of like, you know, get it in JPEG, print it out, forget about this.
Yeah, I don't know. Listening to Doug, you know, if I was somebody that was new to photography and just, you know, thinking about getting started, Doug, I think I would go take up stamp collecting after listening to you.
Well, let me say this. You know, I asked the one of the questions in the show notes is regarding the Fuji Xe2. So I have a good friend who has an XT1 Fuji, which has, you know, the same technology, and he says he uses it all the time. He's a serious photographer, but he often shoots JPEG, and he uses DRO and says it does a great job. So I think Jenny might well be exactly right. It might be aimed at people who are shooting JPEGs, printing straight from the camera, and want to optimize the dynamic range to get the best tonal control that they can out of the image. So
right out of the camera. Yeah.
I think if people who are getting started should turn it on and shoot JPEG and love it.
Yeah, and I know, our good friend of the show, Mr. Giulio Sciorio from Small Camera Big Picture, he shoots with the Panasonic stuff and GH4 and all that, and he's a big proponent of shooting JPEG only and tweaking the in-camera profiles to the specific looks that, are kind of his signature looks, and then delivering finished files to a client directly off of the SD card. Is that
absolutely?
Is that where things are going, you think? Are we coming full circle, back away from RAW and post-processing into in-camera processing? What do you think, Doug?
Well, for some people, that's absolutely the case. I mean, look at the serious photographers who are shooting on their iPhone. Look at you, Frederick. You'll shoot on a small format camera. You'll run it through Snapseed or something and push it out online.
Yeah.
So it's very good. There are a lot of people who either want the immediacy of it, they don't want to be bogged down with post-processing, because let's face it, cameras or cameras combined with mobile devices are extremely powerful today.
Yeah.
Cameras I have take better pictures than I'm capable of taking on my own. So, for a whole class of people, perhaps the majority, this is the way to go.
Love it. Love it. Cool stuff. All right, guys, I want to thank our second sponsor for this episode of This Week in Photo, and that's our good friends over at lynda.com. All right, guys, let's close the show off, and we'll do our Pick of the Week segment. This is the segment where you guys can recommend something to the audience as long as it's somehow related to photography. Evgeny, I'm going to let you go first. What is your Pick of the Week?
Absolutely. One thing that I found last week, and I tweeted about that because when I saw this, it's crazy. So it's not exactly photo related, it's more video related. It's called Feiyu G3 Ultra Handheld Stabilizer for GoPro Hero 3 3-axis. I know. It costs.
Did they come up with an acronym or something?
Yeah, they probably made it up. But what it does, if you go on the link and see a couple of videos, it just makes your video with GoPro, instead of shaky, horrible video, it makes it like Hollywood quality, so it's as smooth as butter. And it's something that you can use for, drone photography or drone videos, for motorcycle videos or photos. So for anything that just kind of like that you might shoot with GoPro, it just insanely improves the picture. I've never seen anything like that, so I was super impressed.
That's cool. You know what? I want to add on to that. I know our friends at Sony are over there shaking their fists because they have the Sony Action Cam, which is a competitor to GoPro, but it has built-in Sony Steadicam or whatever Sony's proprietary stabilization software is, that has that built into it, whereas GoPro's doesn't yet.
This is even better. This is
I'm looking at it. This looks like Steadicam action, moving shots, crane shots, and all that kind of stuff from a GoPro.
Yeah, so that's like Hollywood quality. I'm sure Hollywood is laughing right now, but close to that as it can get for $370.
Oh, that's cool. I may have to get that though. That is really cool. Wow. Okay. Yeah, and it looks cool too. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, 370. Cool. Thanks a lot. That's a good pick of the week. Thanks, Evgeny. Doug K, what's your pick?
My first pick is somebody to deal with all the comments and complaints I get from the last thing I just mentioned. But other than that, a piece of software I've really enjoyed is called RawDigger, RAWDIGGER, at rawdigger.com. And this is a $19.95, $20 piece of software that lets you look at your RAW files before anything touches them. So you can actually see what's in the RAW file, and then it has a huge amount of analytical data.
Oh, geez.
This is done by people who know so much more about RAW files than anybody I know. It breaks it. I've learned so much about what's in a raw file just from this piece of software. So if you want to see what your sensor is really capturing before it gets into Lightroom or Photoshop or what's that other one? Oh yeah, Aperture.
I don't know.
That other one.
Who's using that anyway?
Yeah. If you want to see what they're really like, if you want to see what's really going on, and it'll give you some clues as to how to best expose your raw images. All this business about expose to the right, protect the highlights. You look at what's in your raw files, and you might be quite surprised at what's there. So check it out, rawdigger.com. There are 3 versions. You can spend more than $19.95 because you can get versions that will allow you to actually write the kinds of tools that go into Lightroom to process raw files, but I don't think anybody I know needs to do that.
Again, Doug, looking at this and even looking at the screenshots of things, I just want to take pictures. Can I just go take pictures? Do I really have to put on a lab coat just to look at my raw data?
This is why I'm only here once every 6 months, because there's I think
for the next 6 months,
sorry for your own good.
Well, this is why you pushed me off onto my own show, because we keep saying on TWiP it's not about the gear, and we say, all right, get this guy K out of the way, give him his own damn show.
Let's put him in a sandbox where he can talk about his gear without worrying about getting.
Because the rest of the world doesn't care. But if you do care, see, we don't have.
I'm sure people care, but we
don't have picks of the week.
That's a lot of data.
We need to put picks of the week on all about the gear. But anyway, yeah, this is fun, and if you ever want to geek out, this is one way to do it. Yeah,
I'm looking at that. I'm like, well, I want to look at. Should I be looking at the raw image data for the 4 terabytes of images that I have? And then what's that going to tell me? Or is the use case that, okay, I'm shooting and I need to run it through this software to see if it was truly overexposed in the highlights by 1 micrometer.
No, I'll tell you, if you want to know the shortcut, take one raw file, look at it in this application, compare the histogram to the histogram on the back of your camera, and I think you'll be surprised.
Okay. All right. I may have to do it just to see what all the Doug K fuss is about. It's only $20, right?
$19.95. It's save a nickel.
All right, cool. All right, guys, quickly, my pick is an app that my friend Jeremy Cowart told me about. It's Pixieset, Pixieset. And Evgeny, I'm happy you're on because I wanted to compare and contrast this. Not so much compare, but just sort of bring up that Pixieset is a client photo gallery for photographers, but they're targeting their thing at people that are shooting portraits and models and weddings, and they need to display an awesome-looking gallery just to those people that they can then go click and go buy 8x10s, 11x14s, and all that stuff from. But it does it in a customized way. Conversely, 500 Pics is, I'll let you say it, Evgeny. What's the mission statement for 500 Pics?
It's a photo sharing platform for all photographers. So everyone is creative, and we just want to enable that creativity in everyone. Mm-hmm. Having said that, Pixieset is made by proud Canadians. I just looked it up. So yes, it's good.
Awesome, cool. Yeah. I can. Your Canadian accent throws me off every time. So.
Not just you. I cannot use the Xbox voice activated anything, or Siri. Nobody gets me.
So that's awesome. I never thought about it.
Sad and lonely world there.
That's awesome. I never thought about that. Oh, interesting. Cool. All right. Anyway, Pixieset. It's a client photo gallery for photographers. I think they have a bunch of plans. I think they even start out free, where you can get in there and play around with it. I'm always on the hunt for the perfect photo gallery for, if I'm doing a corporate shoot and I need to dump a bunch of images somewhere and send a link and a password to someone so that they can look through them. That's not my pristine sort of 500 Pics experience with the social and, all that stuff in there. It's not Flickr, obviously, because you're not going to send clients there. It's kind of like a SmugMug, but with all the power that SmugMug has in there. It's almost like if you took one feature of SmugMug and put it over here, this is what it would be. Like the gallery, just the gallery specific features. So Yeah, definitely check it out. At least give the page a look. We'll link to it in the show notes for this particular episode. All right, guys, we are at the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. Once again, I want to thank our friends Squarespace and Lynda.com for their support of the show. Without them, there would be no This Week in Photo. So, yeah, definitely check out their sites. Yevgeny, where would you like folks to go to keep up with what you have going on and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's still the usual spot, so it's probably boring to death to everybody else. 500px.com/my last name. It's spelled TCHEBOTARED. If you're lost, it's right here, or I think it's going to be linked somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, go check it out.
Awesome. And thanks for coming on. Always appreciate having you on.
Always a pleasure.
All right, Mr. Doug K., what about you? Where can people go to check you out and see some of these reviews you're doing and find you in the Arcanum and all that crazy stuff?
That's right. Well, you can always start at dougk.com because from there you can get to all about the gear. But I spend most of my time on Google+. I want to put in a plug for 500px.com because aside from the fact that it scares people away sometimes, it does have some of the best photography online.
Oh, yeah.
None of which is mine, but you can find me on 500px.com at /DKAYE.
Very good. Awesome. I think I'm on 500px at Frederick Van. So just /Frederick Van. You can find me there. All the cool kids are there. So listeners, if you're not on 500px, come on. You got to be there. All right, guys.
All the good names are taken.
Yes, like Frederick Van. Sorry.
Frederick Van is taken.
Yeah, it's gone. Can't have it. Cool. All right, guys. Listeners, if you want to visit our website, you can do so at thisweekinphoto.com. Or if you want to touch base with me directly, you can find me on my site at frederickvan.com. And there you'll find my bio that Yevgeny is going to plagiarize. All right. With that, it is time to take that lens cap off.